Good morning, everyone. We are going to wait for a few more minutes for folks to join us, as I see that people are just trickling in. We are going to wait another minute as I see that numbers are slowing down, but just let's give another minute for folks to join in. Okay. Good morning and welcome to today's work group meeting, which is about joint grant solicitation for statewide clean cars for all and financing assistance for lower income consumer projects. My name is Ali Koestani, Financing Assistance Program Lead at CARB, and today with my colleagues at CC4A Team Program, we are here to provide information on the upcoming joint solicitation for these two programs and answer as many questions as you might have. But before we start, I would like to mention that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on CARB's Low Carbon Transportation Investments website soon. And with that, we're going to start our meeting today. As you know, on January 20th this year, we had a work group meeting on the grant solicitation for financing assistance for fiscal year 2021-22 funds, and another one on April 11th for statewide CC4A project. Over the years and throughout the public processes of developing these programs, we repeatedly received feedback from stakeholders and consumers, urging us to align our incentive programs and making it easier for low-income Californians to apply and receive clean vehicle purchase incentives. This joint solicitation is in response to that feedback and is another step forward to better align two major clean vehicle purchase incentive programs and to make it easier for lower income and disadvantaged consumers in California. Our hope is that a single administrator will allow us to find more ways to ease the application processes. CC4A and Financing Assistance Program have a lot in common in terms of goals, target consumers, application processing, and mechanics of program administration. We strongly believe that having one grantee running these two programs will benefit both the state and low-income consumers by providing a seamless application processing and improved user experience. We recognize the complexity and scope of the work. However, we believe that with lessons learned from running and piloting multiple programs with different grantees over the years, Along with collective efforts of CARBs and stakeholders like you, we will be successful. And this is going to be a big step in the right direction. With sufficient proposed funding in Governor's initial budget this year and his focus on equity, we hope we receive strong applications for this joint grant solicitation. Given the complexity of these programs and having different components such as outreach, education, financing, car scrap, case management, and application processing, we would like to see different expertise on potential applications for this solicitation that may come from extensive collaboration and partnerships. We expect strong applications consist of diverse partnerships that demonstrate proven experience in these areas. A well-structured, forward-thinking budget is another key factor that contributes to the strength of an application. We believe that this solicitation is just the beginning of a bigger effort, and applications that demonstrate future growth and scalability in their budget and plan will have a better chance of success. With respect to the available funding for this solicitation, we are pretty sure that we have $15.5 million from fiscal year 2021-22 for financing assistance, with additional funds in the coming year's budgets. $125 million is proposed for statewide CC4A. There might be another $125 million for statewide CC4A in the next fiscal year, but we will have a better idea of funding when Governor's May revised budget become available next week. Regarding the timeline of the solicitation, here at CARB, staff on both programs are working closely together just to prepare the solicitation material and groundwork being taken care of. So we are hoping to be ready when the and release the solicitation by the time the budget is finalized. So we are hoping for no later than the June or July timeframe for the solicitation release. So we'll see how it goes with the budget, and we may go a little bit early. With that, I just want to one more time emphasize about the essential factors that we are anticipating to see in the applications, which are going to be strong partnerships across the board and strong budget and future forward-looking plannings. With that, I would like to open the floor for questions. But before that, I just want to remind today's participants that this work group meeting is just about the solicitation and its mechanics and not program policy. So I'd appreciate if we can keep all the questions related to the solicitation. There is ample time to provide as much information as possible to help potential future applicants to bring us strong proposals. We also recognize that there are policy questions about both programs that many of you may have, and we want to encourage you to reach out to discuss those with us and to participate in future work groups. Please sign up for listservs for notification about future work groups if you aren't already on the list. And with that, I'll ask my colleague Arya to open the lines for questions. Arya?
Thank you, Ali. Good morning, everyone. You can use the Zoom feature to raise your hand. For those of you participating by phone, press pound or #2 to raise your hand. When you're called on, please state your name and affiliation. We don't have any raised hands. Oh, I'm sorry. Jonathan Changus, I have unmuted your mic.
Hi, good morning. Jonathan Changus with the Center for Sustainable Energy. A couple of clarifying questions. With regard to the budget and the numbers you just shared, the $15.5 million for financing assistance, $125 million for CC4A currently, maybe another $125 million. Is the intention in the solicitation to have separate buckets for financing assistance versus the Clean Cars for All component, or will all the funds be kind of mingled and applications come through I guess, will there be carve outs for specific tracks, financing assistance versus scrap and replace is the first question. And then I forgot my second, so I'll just start there.
Lisa, would you like to?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Lisa McCumber, California Air Resources Board Manager overseeing the Financing Assistance Program, CVRP, and our funding plan. Thanks, Jonathan. Yes, what the funds are allocated in the budget separately. So within the solicitation, they will be itemized separately. For that very reason, they won't be mixed together. So we will be looking at how both of those things would break out. But again, as Ali mentioned, there's so many of the functions for the two programs that overlap. And so there are opportunities, obviously, we hope, for applicants to consider how they would find maybe efficiencies and how they can do things to support both programs. And we'll be looking to you guys to structure, or to any potential applicant to structure the budget in a way that reflects that. And we'll break that out a whole lot more in how the solicitation itself is drafted.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you for that clarification. I remember my second question. Second one, kind of somewhat related, is the financing assistance, then bucket and tranche, is anticipated to still support potentially on the loan side, folks that go through the current air district programs would, you know, like if someone went through BachMed, for example, or SAC Metro and got scrap and replaced, would they still be eligible for the access to the low interest lending? And should that be part of something that we build into a proposal, is servicing?
Yeah, none of the current stackability of the programs would change.
Got it.
So yes, a consumer that takes advantage of the Clean Cars for All path, but needs financing, will still have access to that financing through the financing component.
Excellent, thank you.
Next up, we have Roman. Roman, I have unmuted your mic.
Yeah, thank you, Aria. Yeah, good morning, y'all. Roman Partia Lopez with the Green Lining Institute. Thank you for the space today, and thank you, Ali, for that quick overview. I have just a couple comments before we proceed. So I feel like I need to make these based on some of the comments you've made, Ali. First off, I just want to flag a previous and ongoing comment that I've been making for some time now of providing slides for these types of conversations. I realize that, you know, other agencies, have slides that help guide and are posted days in advance of these types of workshops, work groups, whatever the event might be. And for some reason, you know, I've yet to see that from CARB with a consistent basis. I mean, I think it's really helpful to have that beforehand, because we can know exactly what we're going to discuss and what we can provide feedback on. And the fact that that is not provided, it is a procedural inequity that we continue to see, and that I hope moving forward is addressed. And not just with this work group, but I've seen it with others. I shared it yesterday at HVIP in their work group, and the lack of slides doesn't help with the discussion or what the expectation of the discussion might be. So if we can please start addressing that, that would be really helpful. Two, I wanted to just share my disappointment and concern of the fact that, you know, Ali, you just mentioned that the discussion for today is really solely focused on the grant solicitation and not necessarily on the policy issues of this joint solicitation, when there are clearly some potential policy discussions that are needed to have about this potential joint solicitation. You know, as you all are aware, and other folks might be, this was announced a month ago or a little bit less in the previous work group, when there hasn't been a public discussion around the impacts of a joint solicitation might be, and wanting to have that be part of a public conversation with more folks rather than just one that's held in private. And so I really wanted to flag that and be clear that that is the approach that you all want to take today, and just focus on the solicitation requirements and not necessarily the policy ones.
Thank you, Ramon. Sure. With respect to your first question, yeah, we understand and recognize the need for having slides. The reason that I didn't provide any slides for this particular workgroup meeting is that Essentially, we have two types of workgroup meetings. Some of them are just about the concepts, and for example, this one is just a solicitation. No numbers, no graphs or anything that we are going to particularly point to. But for those workgroup meetings and public processes that we have programmatic discussions, we've always provided, and we strive to do so in the future workgroup meetings. But if even for the conceptual discussions just like this, if that would be helpful, we'll be happy to provide some slides and at a minimum some framework key points in advance. Duly noted, and we'll try to do that. With respect to your second question, this is something that has been going on for almost years. We have heard over and over from stakeholders that we need to bring these programs together closer to make it seamless and easier for applicants. This is one step in that direction. And when we announced it about a month ago, it was through the public process CC4A workgroup meeting, and we received some feedbacks. Before I pass it to Lisa, I just wanted to make this point that historically we have been holding public workgroup meeting specific to solicitation just to help potential applicants to understand and learn what is at stake, what is the scope of the solicitation, how much money, and these kind of strictly solicitation related questions. So when we dive into the policy, folks may lose a chance to ask necessary important questions. But if it's needed, we would be more than happy to schedule some other workgroup meetings to discuss purely policy issues. And as you know that we have an open door policy here, always happy to talk to you guys in person or as a group. Lisa, would you like to add?
Thanks, Ali. That was great. Yeah, the only thing that I'll add, actually on both things, yeah, on the slides for work groups, we have heard that loud and clear, Ramona. I do appreciate the comment. One of the challenges that we do have is that for some, we aren't consistent. You're absolutely right. And I think that where we know we're going to be presenting data and information, at least within the vehicle purchase incentive space, and I recognize your comment is much larger than that, and we're going to continue to work with our partner teams here to make sure that we are better and more consistent. But just speaking for this particular realm, the vehicle purchase incentives, we are trying to get better about making sure we're providing slides when we are putting a lot of information out there for folks to digest, that we can get them posted as early as possible. It's an uphill battle for us as well to do that. But we are working on trying to get better with that. For today's workshop and for traditionally for solicitation-based workshops, our challenge is because we're going to be going into at some point here in the next couple months, a period where we're in kind of lockdown. It's a formal process. And so while that doesn't mean we couldn't put out slides, historically, we don't put a lot of the specifics about the solicitation out until the solicitation is finalized and ready for folks to look at. And that is to ensure that nobody has a competitive edge over somebody else based on when they came in the process. And we heard time and time again from stakeholders that in order to make it as fair as possible, that we want to be transparent throughout, but also consistent in how we're getting the information when we're putting the information out. And so we don't typically provide slides at solicitation focused work groups. But I'm happy to take that comment back and kind of rethink what kinds of things maybe we could provide in slides, even if it is simply just the timelines for you or things like that. So we will do that. On your second point, if there are concerns, if there are policy related concerns specifically about the joint solicitation, that is what we're here to talk about today. What we mean when we say that we don't want to kind of get into policy debates today is we want to use the limited time, just like Ali said, to give those that are potentially interested in running this program, in thinking about how they might apply to such a solicitation that combines two very large programs, opportunities to ask about the mechanics. And that's not to say that we aren't open to talking about the policy. And we aren't saying that that means that every policy conversation will be held behind closed doors. We very much want to have those conversations in public. And we have policy specific work groups to do that. But again, if there is something that happens to be policy focused that's related to the fact that we're proposing doing a joint solicitation, please raise it. Like we do, if there are concerns about us doing this, we do want to hear those concerns. We've shared our reasoning why we think this is a great approach, but if there are folks that don't think it's a great approach, that's what we want to hear today. We want to know what you guys think about the fact that we'd like to move forward in this way, that we're going to look to kind of consolidate and bring things together. And, again, our full focus is consumers. We want to try to make it easier on consumers. And we saw this as a first step opportunity to do that. But if you've got concerns, we'd love to hear them.
Yeah, thanks, Ali and Lisa for that feedback. Appreciate it. Just going back to the slides, and again, this goes beyond just the specific, and I don't want to take up too much time on it, right? But this from the specific work group, it is just a tendency that I've seen from the Resources Board that I hope I see improvement, and not just speaking from Green Lining's perspective, but from other stakeholders of being able to have that in front of us would be really helpful. And even just thinking about this work group, I know this is focused on the solicitation, but the workshop happened about a month ago. There were slides in that presentation from a month ago for Clean Cars for All that could have been helpful for us to look at as you were providing the background, right? Not just on the reason for the joint solicitation, but also sharing some of the details of what would be in that joint. Not in the solicitation itself, but the requirements of the programs. And I know you mentioned those are the policy focused work groups, but that was one happened a month ago, and we're not having another one because if this timeline continues, we're not going to see that. We're not potentially having another policy one until maybe after the solicitation, right? If the timeline that you all have identified is by next month, where we would have the solicitation out. So I want to share that, and really hoping that as we think about how we're embedding equity in these very equity specific programs, that we're doing so through each of the process, right? As we think about operationalizing equity, not just in the mission and visions, but how we're in our procedural, in our implementation, and then in our evaluation and analysis. So with that, I just want to share one quick comment that is related to this, that I feel it needs to be part of this overall discussion around the moving of these two forward. Ali mentioned that there a lot of overlaps between the two programs, and that's why this is moving forward as a joint solicitation. But I want to note that that is because of the fact that the DAC requirement has been removed from the Clean Cars for All program to now being a strategy, not an eligibility, but a strategy, which now means that, yes, Clean Cars for All and Statewide and CVAP are aligned, but previously under the Clean Cars for All regulation, that is a requirement. And removing that requirement is a point of concern for us because, what we've realized and what we've seen from program implementation right now is that benefits are not primarily going to disadvantaged communities. When we look at CVAP, the number of DAC participants, and that program doesn't have a DAC requirement, has declined significantly. And that is an area of concern that we want to avoid, because we want to, if we're really addressing equity and ensuring that our most impacted communities, our frontline communities, are seeing benefits, we need to make sure that these incentives are being targeted. And then on top of that, Clean Vehicle Assistance Program is moving to a need-based approach, which is going to require a more targeted, focused, and intentionality in developing that program to the statewide. That could be that, but because of the amount of funding that's available right now, it seems like there's going to be a rush just to get money out the door. And those two project objectives seem completely different. And part of the feedback I might get is that, well, some of that can be worked out during the solicitation, something that's identified by the program administrator. But I think that has been part of the issue up to now, that we leave it up to the program administrator to determine how to get to those end goals that we have, and we continue to fall short. We've been falling short on some of our equity vehicle incentive programs. We've been falling short on CMO, on ensuring that they're being directed at our most needed. And so I just really wanted to flag that, and I'm hoping that we can slow this process down a little bit. And I know this is all tied to the governor's budget, but we need to slow down. We need to really evaluate and analyze whether this is the best approach to ensure that we are providing those direct and meaningful benefits to our most impacted those in our disadvantaged communities. And especially as we think about some of the previous comments in other workshops about how Black and Brown communities are benefiting from this or lack thereof, how this process will help ensure that they are receiving those direct and meaningful benefits.
Thank you, Ramon. No, at the risk of sounding passive, which I genuinely am not, I do hear you and I don't disagree with you. We've ran first come, first serve programs for a long time that have absolutely missed the mark on how we have been able to provide true, meaningful, measurable benefits to disadvantaged communities and communities of color. 100% correct. One of the reasons why we're moving from first come, first serve in our programs to needs-based approaches is in an attempt to change the way that we are accomplishing our goals. The history of these programs is deep, and you know this because you've worked on these programs for a long time with us. We are constantly trying to battle or balance, you know, one end of the spectrum pushing us to spend dollars quickly, and that is very challenging when we want to be more methodical and focused and find ways to ensure that the dollars really truly are helping those folks that need them. We also have this balance of making sure that, again, the money's moving fast, but that it's also easy for people to get. But then we have to balance that with how do we ensure that the right consumers are getting it, which makes it a cumbersome process. There's a lot of different things that we're trying to balance here. And we agree. We want to do better on this point. And I hope you understand this is coming from a very genuine place. And a needs-based approach through both of these programs and hopefully through more of our programs going forward is going to help us find ways to do that. When it comes to the DAC requirement, I hear you. That's one of the things we will go back and talk about as staff and figure out how we address. We're not going to just look to the potential administrator to solve that problem for us. We will be very active in how that comes to be, and there will be more work groups and more conversations around that. When, I can't tell you just yet, because we've got this work group, we've got other work groups we're trying to wrap up in order to get a draft funding plan out. So there are other opportunities coming. We'll have a workshop pretty soon, which will be another large public opportunity to have these conversations. There'll be other work groups around that. Both before, hopefully before, if not before, quickly thereafter, we've got our solicitation in place. The thing about the solicitation, and I hope that this does answer some questions for folks generally, is by getting an administrator on board, it helps us tremendously. Not necessarily the policy thinking. While traditionally they've helped us a little bit there, it helps us with the staff. We don't have the resources to do every single thing that needs to be done, to get the research done, to have all the conversations that need to be had, to get the updates out to you all that we want to. We can't, from a staff capacity, do that. We are, with the growing amounts of money we've received over the years, and our staff have not grown. We're trying to manage all of it, but bringing an administrator on to help us do some of the work so that we can have the conversations with you guys around what the right policies are, and we can help figure out that at the higher level, and then work with the administrator to help figure out the in the weeds of how to actually do the implementation. It's helpful for us. And while I recognize historically, because of the way the programs have been set up as a first come, first serve program, it hasn't achieved the equity goals that we wanted to achieve. But again, we're in a new phase now. We really are in trying to define needs-based. We've had several work groups. They've been few and far between on purpose because we're going back and doing research. It's just Ali. It's Ali and I and our team trying to help put in that thought. And, you know, we are working with our administrator that's at the table now. They've been super helpful, but our team is very, very small and there's so much that needs to be done. So on needs-based, we will continue to have those policy conversations about how to make that as strong as possible before we implement anything. We're getting a lot of pressure to get financing open and running as quickly as possible. And I am pumping the brakes. And it's not because we don't want to get out there. It's not because we don't know that consumers want to buy cars now, but I want it to be right. We don't want to get a program out there that isn't going to be helpful, that's going to spend the money so fast. And most of those people aren't going to need the money really, right? We are very sensitive to that. And so please know, I hear your frustration. I hear your disappointment. There will be more public conversations to come. We're not saying the door is closed. We're not saying that we're not open to hearing it. We're not saying we're not open to talking through the issues. We very much want to do that. The work group today, like we said, we're trying to break things up so that there are different opportunities for different things. Another thing we've heard in the past, and the reason why we do this is because we've heard that potential applicants don't have enough opportunities to ask questions about what we might do in a solicitation, and historically in the past, we'd maybe have one of these just before a solicitation came out. We're trying to do more of them. We're trying to have more opportunities for potential applicants to understand the mechanics of what we might be looking for. And again, I hear you on the slides thing, and I know that can help better, and we'll try to figure out what we can do there. But having these siloed conversations a little bit when it comes to what the mechanics look like versus what the policy look like, we've heard that that's important. So that's what we're trying to offer here, just simply. And so we're not trying to gaslight in any way and say the policy is not important. It very much is, and we will absolutely get there.
Yeah, and I appreciate that feedback, Lisa and Ali. I mean, I know it's just you two, and how complicated and difficult it is, right? To also transition programs, right, from what they used to be to one that is centering and better embedding equity as part of that process. The last thing I'll say is I want to make sure others who have questions, especially around the solicitation, do have that space to ask questions about that. But I do think that to your point about the policy discussions, should inform what the end solicitation looks like. And I think for this specific one, I think it's critical that we do have those policy discussions before we determine how the solicitation moves forward. I honestly feel like we're moving relatively quickly. And I hear you about wanting to bring an administrator to help with those questions. But at the same time, I want to make sure we have all of that before, right? And this is just my input. And when I hear it, and I would hope to hear from others, that we need to slow down that process, answer some of these policy questions, and then based on all of that feedback, then we can determine if one, a joint solicitation is what is best, and two, whether the guidelines that are going to be part of that are the ones that need to be there to ensure that we are delivering those direct and meaningful benefits to disadvantaged and low-income communities. So I thank you for the time, and thank you for allowing me to provide this feedback, but just really wanted to flag that and ensure that we do take a step back and that we do slow down to make sure that we're addressing all of this before we get to a point where we're going to have to implement it. We're going to have to just start spending money without addressing a lot of the policy questions at first.
Yep. We will go back and see how we can fit in some more, if we can get some more work groups in before we launch, for sure.
Yeah, just before you go, Ramon, there is a work group meeting scheduled, and the meeting is going to go out today by the end of the day for May 25th. And we are going to continue the discussion on the needs-based approach, which is going to be applicable to both of these programs, CC4A, Statewide CC4A, and finance consistent. And there's going to be an opportunity just to talk a lot more about the policies that will help us improve and develop these programs. So be on the lookout for the notice by the end of the day today.
Next up, we have Chris Chavez. Chris, I've unmuted your mic.
Yes, thank you. This is Chris Chavez, Deputy Policy Director at Coalition for Clean Air. I want to echo and agree with the comments that Roman just gave. And I think it's very important for the potential administrators of this program to know that the equity advocates that helped create the original Clean Cars for All program have serious concerns about what's being proposed so far. Certainly the DAC requirement, or you're dropping the DAC requirement, goes against the spirit of SB 1275, which was something that, you know, a lot of the equity advocates have been worked on and been part of the implementation of since 2014. But also the fact that I think CVAP has been going in a different direction than what is being considered here. And I think that's something that also needs to be addressed. You know, CVAP has been going more towards the direction of case management and counseling rather than a broad sort of financial-based program. So I'm curious as to how CARB, in its statewide expansion for its administrator, is looking at expanding the program when really its focus, the direction it's been heading in, is actually more narrow. I think that is also an issue where we're concerned, because the skill sets needed for statewide expansion of Clean Cars for All is different than what is needed for the relaunch of CVAP. So can CARB kind of describe or explain to what they're looking at for this, on the CVAP side of things?
I think Ali has froze, so I will respond. So on CVAP in particular, I'd say, I don't want to say that necessarily it's a narrowing. Well, in a way it is, right? We're moving away from first come, first serve, because as we saw in that program, a significant amount of those dollars went towards more expensive vehicles, and consumers that, while they qualify based on the income qualifying, the calculation and where the thresholds were set, the funds went extremely fast. And one could argue that that means potentially the incentive amount is too much, but we hear consistently from those on the lower end of the spectrum that the incentive amount isn't enough, and that isn't the issue. It's that either there's this very significant need, which that is a possibility, or we need to really be focusing the program more on the certain need criteria. And so, as we've talked about in some of the work groups, and we'll talk about again later on this month, what does those needs criteria look like? And how can we best target the right consumers, whether that is, and we expect that that will be done through a combination of things. It's going to be done through some combination of meeting particular criteria, as well as providing us what the actual need is in some way. Do they already have a vehicle? Do they not? A case management approach of understanding who the consumer is and what that consumer's individual needs are, and where they might fit within that spectrum, within how you could apply in the program. And then also outreach, how we're targeting outreach and making sure that the outreach that we're doing is really speaking to the particular community. We've heard time and time again that while we may put out a flyer, a universal flyer, say statewide, that some communities, it just doesn't speak to them. It's not the right language, it's not the right look. And so partnerships in helping us figure these things out is really, really important, because again, we can't figure these things out on our own. We need you guys to help tell us, and our partners to help tell us what we should be looking for. When it comes to Clean Cars for All, as the team said at their last work group about a month ago, this needs-based approach that we're looking at in financing assistance will fit in very well with what we're looking at there too. And to Ramon's point, I do hear it, I get it, and I agree. We will get more policy work groups on the table to talk about how that does look across the two, because we haven't had enough of those conversations yet. We internally have been trying to figure out how we have that conversation with you guys. And so I hear that the need is to have those conversations more on the front end, and we will do that. We won't push out a solicitation without having a few more of those conversations. So I'm not sure if that fully answers your question or not, but
yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think that's helpful to know. In terms of, I think the one other point that certainly from an administrative point of view is what outreach is going to look like, and how working with community-based organizations and other other partners in reaching out to hard-to-serve communities is going to be very important. The last thing we want to see is a top-down program that's just basically like a slightly more equity-focused version of CVRP, where it's just an online application with online advertisements. We want to see actual engagement on the ground with the community, and that's something that's going to be very important to the equity advocates who have worked on the program and seen success in different parts of California. I think, looking at where the air districts that do on the ground engagement and really getting to those hard to reach communities, we like to hold those up as the models of success rather than just top down, apply online sort of approaches.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Chris. We're right there with you. And it's funny, we had a conversation with some labor partners earlier this week, and got very similar feedback. And I think the biggest takeaway I took from that conversation, which is very much echoed in what you just said, is one of the things we need to do a much better job at, and we are excited to do a better job at, is how do we support the consumer that maybe doesn't use email every day? With CVRP, that is the primary mode. Again, that program was built 12 years ago. We've got evolving that we need to do, I think, in the mechanics of that program, and we're working on those. We've got kind of some plans for how to address those. But how do we get to a point of letting a consumer choose the best way that they want to communicate, whether it's via email, whether it's via text, whether it's talking to a person, and how do we ensure that we've got those right ambassadors, and those are our CBOs, those are our partners, that are available to help answer the questions and be a resource and really help the person through. And so case management, and I know we've talked about this in the other work groups before, but case management is so very important. And it's funny to think about how our very, very small Bay Area program for financing assistance, in our minds at least, has kind of become the model for this. It's so very hands-on. The work that program does through CHDC, Community Housing and Development Corporation, has been very, very critical to meeting that need. And we've heard from the consumers that have participated how absolutely valuable it has been to them to be able to pick up the phone, have that conversation, understand how the finances work, understand what they're getting into, and be successful at the end of the day with their purchase. And the idea of taking this very small scale, very hands-on approach statewide is a little terrifying, because it's a lot to manage. But again, we see so much value in it, and we know that the broad top level approach of just a simple website come through the door doesn't work for everybody, and we know that. And again, this is why we want to do better, why we want to see a needs-based approach that works, that has partners, case management, why all these things have been such a big focus of our conversation over the last 6 months in development for the program. So thank you for the comment.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, I lost connection. I'm pretty sure that Lisa handled the questions and answered the question that you had, but I just wanted to mention that when we are talking about financing assistance, I just wanted to make that point that CVAP, or Clean Vehicle Assistance Program, is one of the programs. The other program that we have is the Drive Clean Assistance Program that Lisa just mentioned in Bay Area. So these two programs, although both of them are financing assistance, we were piloting two totally separate approach in terms of providing services and assistance to consumers. And we learned a lot of lessons, and that's why, as a result of analyzing all these kind of information over the years, we came up with we recognized the gaps. What is working with the statewide program, what is working really good in the local program. And as a result, we came up with the proposal of needs-based model, and we are extending what local program at CHDC is offering and extending it to statewide, as well as benefiting of some of the capabilities and lessons learned from Clean Vehicle. But I recognize that because statewide has a wider reach, CVAP has a wider reach and got more recognition, but it's not just that program. There are two programs on this one. I just wanted to make that point. And I hope that in the next 3 weeks that we are going to have another work group meeting on the needs-based model. We are going to talk more details about how we are going to partner and utilize the capabilities of CBOs, outreach partners, to address the points that you rightfully mentioned about getting to the people who are not necessarily familiar or using media or social media or cell phones or emails on a day-to-day basis. So they are all in there in that concept.
All right, Aria, before we go to the next hands, there's a couple Q&As, or well, one in particular that I want to make sure I address because it kind of fits in with the things that Ali and I were just talking about. We had a question from Ladonna Williams on who our administrators are. So just to kind of run down the list, for the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project, our current administrator is the Center for Sustainable Energy, or CSE. And they've actually been the administrator of that program for its full existence for the last 12 years. For our statewide financing assistance program, the Clean Vehicle Assistance Program, that's Beneficial State Foundation, BSF, and they've been our administrator for that program since its inception. Gosh, what was that, about 2016 or so, 2015 when we finally launched, somewhere around there.
Yeah, 15.
Yes, the Community Housing and Development Corporation, or CHDC, is the administrator for our smaller financing assistance pilot that's in the Bay Area. And then on the Clean Cars for All side, our administrators are the air districts currently. So we've got 5 air districts that oversee those programs: South Coast, San Joaquin Valley, Sac Metro, Bay Area program, and San Diego most recently. And there are other Q&As that I will get to in a moment, but let's make our way through some more hands. So Aria?
Yeah. Next up, we have Enid Jaffe. Enid, I have unmuted your mic.
Okay, this is Enid Jaffe from Green Paradigm Consulting. First of all, I support what was said earlier about equity, because I'm one of the contractors for South Coast Air Quality Management District's program, Replace Your Ride, and we definitely see that there are clusters of applicants based on word of mouth, and that is not equally spread across the South Coast region. So, but I do have 2 questions. So the first one is the RFP that's going to come out, is that going to be a wrap around the existing air district programs, or is, because in the previous call it was said that the air districts are going to retain their programs, but then we're going to have this statewide program? So that's one question. And the second is, and this is probably more a suggestion than a question, but I know that the administrative fees for the current programs, at least what we're told by the air district, are just not sufficient for the level of effort that's required. And particularly, they don't allow any marketing or outreach. There just isn't the funding for it, and not the kind of case management that, you know, I certainly feel is needed. So I hope that there will be some flexibility on that in the new solicitation. That's it. Thank you.
Anthony, would you like to cover the gaps on CC4A?
I'm sorry, Lisa, my internet's going in and out right now. Maybe.
No worries. Let me check with Aaron because I don't want to misspeak. Aaron, are you able to speak to the difference in how statewide will cover gaps between the districts?
Yeah, so yes, I can, Lisa. In terms of, again, I think just the typical theme of this work group, we're looking to solicit feedback on all these things. We want that statewide program to work. In terms of, we've heard about administrative fees and things like that. I think we're still open to hearing how we can make this statewide solicitation, how we can make both of these programs work together. We recognize that these programs are super detailed and complicated to administer. I think we're open to figuring out how to make them work. I think that's really what I can say right now. I hope that kind of answers the question. Yeah. I hope that answers the question. It's like, we're open to hearing how we can make these programs work. We're open to how we can change our guidelines, make things work. So yeah.
Enid, I think too, when it comes to kind of the boundaries, the goal of the statewide program isn't necessarily to overwrite what the districts are doing. It really is to fill gaps. We've heard time and time again that there are consumer opportunities, whether it is within disadvantaged communities or low-income communities, folks that haven't had an opportunity to participate in these things, and that the programs are so different across, which for each community, we recognize there's value to that, right? There's value to having a different way to apply or a different way to participate within a different region, based on that region's needs or what those consumers are looking for. But a statewide approach to CC4A, our goal is again to kind of bridge the gaps so that consumers that haven't been able to participate traditionally have those opportunities, and we're able to get more of the older cars off of the road, as well as, just be able to reach those smaller areas, the smaller air districts that really can't run these types of programs. We want to be able to offer them the support that they need. And to the extent that the other districts, that we can partner and make sure that we're reaching consumers and consumers have the opportunity to figure out what the right pathway is for them. We want to do that. We want to make sure that we build this with partnerships with the districts in mind as well. So it is, like Erin said, it's a work in progress. We are still looking for your feedback on the best way to do this, but we want to make sure that the partnerships are there. And really it's making sure the opportunities are there for the consumers that haven't been able to participate yet.
Thank you. Next up, we have Ladonna Williams. Ladonna, I've unmuted your mic.
Yes, good morning. Ladonna Williams, all positives possible. Good morning, everybody. So I had a couple of questions. Thank you, Lisa, for answering my question. And you did mention those administrators. I think one of them you mentioned, the community housing development, is in the Bay Area. I believe they're located in Richmond, if that's the same one, correct? But I wanted to find out the locations of your previous administrators, and then I wanted to kind of make a comment about it.
Yes, so Richmond, okay. Yes, for CHDC. Beneficial State Foundation is out of Oakland, but they do have various other kind of hubs within the state, in the Valley as well. Mostly Northern California, though, is where they're based out of. And Center for Sustainability is based out of San Diego. However, especially with the pandemic, they've really kind of broadened. And Center for Sustainable Energy is more of a national nonprofit. And so they run other vehicle incentive programs in other states as well. Mm-hmm. So they're kind of focused all over, but they've got a Sacramento office and a Bay Area office. They've got offices kind of all throughout the state.
Oh, okay. And then you also mentioned with the clean cars, the different air districts in the regions are also part of that, right?
Correct.
Okay. So can you tell me, or can anyone tell me at this point, the current breakdown of the past recipients? What percentage were Latino, Asian, white, and Black that actually benefited or had gotten benefits from this program, particularly the DAC or disadvantaged areas?
So we have some of that data.
Okay. And I'm not asking for you to be exact. I just want to, well, I would prefer exact, but if not, just some approximate figures of what you guys currently know of the percentages of who actually got benefit under the disadvantage program.
Of course. So I don't have numbers at the moment, so I can't give you anything right now, but we can certainly pull that together and have that available for you. What I can say though is that, you know, again, one of the efforts we're trying to do here is figure out how to consolidate so that we are getting consistent information across each of the programs. But right now, the way that we collect ethnicity information for some of the programs is only done through surveys. For example, it's not part of the actual application process. Some of them it is. So it kind of varies. It hasn't been consistent because a lot of these programs have been developed in silos. And so we are trying to find ways to bring them together so they aren't being developed in silos so we can collect consistent information. But we do have some of it, and we'll work with the team to pull together what we've got so we can provide that information, and we'll make sure to include it in an upcoming work group so that we've got it available for everybody, and we'll make sure that it's in slides for you too.
Okay. And I just wanted to add, I know, you know, it's no set way about this. Folks are really kind of trying to figure this out as we go through it. And the best indicator is to look back, right, at what worked and what hasn't worked. And, you know, folks can take it personal if they want to. It's not meant personally. This is meant as an overall program. And as you know, from the very onset, I've raised the issue about Black folks being the least supported in this program. So they need to be the first supported or priority. I know y'all said, you know, we don't want this to be the programmatic parts of it. But in my mind, I can't see how we really separate it when we're talking about moving forward and the solicitation. And I'm glad it's June. I want to see things rolling and moving. Although we haven't been part of this process, we are, and we're playing catch up, trying to figure it out. But it is so many moving pieces. But it appears to me that since from the very beginning, and we get it, you guys have explained it over and over, you really didn't necessarily know what you guys were doing. You were just trying to do something that benefits, you know, the communities, and especially those that don't normally get these benefits. But it's just difficult for me to see how we've had these administrators in place and no one flagged y'all unless they did and y'all didn't listen. But no one flagged y'all to say, hey, first come, first serve. And we're talking about disadvantaged folks and including them. Why didn't anybody pull y'all and say, and they shouldn't have had to pull you because you're over the state. But since clearly somebody should have spoken up but didn't, nobody out of these groups said, first come, first serve is not going to support or catch the communities or the folks who needed the most. And now they're still in place, and we're to say, okay, you know what? Yes, that happened, but let's keep working with them to get this thing right. It seems to me like it needs to be shook up, shook down, peel back the layers, and start this thing over again in the sense of how is it we should serve those that haven't been served? It's not rocket science, and it's not that difficult. It is looking at those numbers, seeing who did not really get the support. And we know they didn't because, as we said before, through that audit, you guys got called out on being poverty pimps. That is an ugly title that is stuck in our brain that will not go away. And it came back down to the fact that those, particularly African Americans, folks say Black and brown, but brown did get supported way more than Black did. Black still continues to be at that bottom of the list. And so I want to see through the solicitation, through the programs that you guys are, you know, trying to put together, and with all of these moving pieces, how are we going to really be sure that this is a clean cars for all program? Because so far it's been a clean cars for some. And it is at the programmatic level, it is at the solicitation level, it's all of the levels above. And it's very hard to figure out where do we fit in with all these moving pieces.
Thanks, Ladonna. It's I appreciate the comment a lot. And we have been aware, I think, for some time that the equity components of these programs they do fall short. this is part of the balance that we struggle with. And, you know, and I know I've said this before, so I apologize repeating it again, but like, you know, we get a lot of pressure to get the money spent and get the money spent very quickly. And we try to balance that with how we meet the equity needs. And the amount of time that we're turning these things around sometimes gets away from us. And so since November, we've been in this very reset mode, as you've heard, because you've been at a lot of our more recent conversations, starting with financing assistance and bringing this needs-based approach to the table. We know we need a reset, and we've known for some time that we need a reset and haven't had the opportunity to do that. And we want to reset, and we want all of you at the table to help us figure out the right way to do that going forward. You know, there are comments in the Q&A, and I'll not totally a segue, but I think they're appropriate. There are comments in the Q&A. A couple that have come in from a participant, let's see, Erica Olson. One regarding, you know, as a consumer, it sounds like we're keeping the program closed because of these administrative issues. It's been a really long time and we really need to get it open. It's so hard for us because we are hearing this, we need to push. And on the other hand, but we need to also make sure that we're meeting all of the equity concerns, and we can't do both. We certainly can't do both. But that's why in November, we made a commitment to you all to be methodical about this and make sure that before we reopen on a statewide level for financing assistance, and now hopefully coupled with Clean Cars for All on a statewide basis, that we are thoughtful about how we do that so that we are truly bringing these incentives to those consumers who need them. Another comment we have has to do with, you know, not limiting consumers' ability to buy the types of cars that they want to buy, because of the comment that I made about a lot of the purchases being for expensive vehicles. That also speaks very much to, you know, what we've seen here in these programs. We have seen a lot of consumers come through that are buying expensive cars, and we don't necessarily want to limit consumers' choice. However, those consumers that really need the support in these types of programs that fall within the low income designations, that fall within the communities of color, Black and brown, aren't necessarily going to be the ones that are going to be buying these really expensive vehicles. And if they are, we don't want to necessarily limit that choice, but it's a balance. We want the money to be there. And the only way the money is going to be there is if we are putting some limitations on the program. And so we're trying to find the right balance. What is the right balance to ensure there's as much choice as possible, but the funding is there to support as many low-income consumers, as many consumers and communities of color that we can in a thoughtful and in a fair way. So thank you for the comment. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. And I would just like to add too, as we move through these phases, I think we're beyond constantly mentioning Black and brown. I think it's okay to mention either or, but I don't think we have to always be lumped together. That has also been a disservice to us as well, especially on the American Black end, because it's as if people cannot say Black without adding something else in addition to it. And since we are the ones at the lowest bottom of the list when it comes to positive, or at the top of the list when it comes to the negative end, you know, when what I opened it up with was talking about Black, not brown. I would just appreciate that folks understand that we are separate. We are not together, and our issues and what we go through and the burdens are not equally the same either. So I appreciate your explanation. Thank you.
Thanks, Ladonna. And we'll do better to make sure that we're addressing each community individually to respect that. Absolutely.
Next up, we have Janelle London. Janelle, I have unmuted your mic.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you guys for the opportunity to speak today. I just wanted to echo Ladonna's concerns about metrics and Roman's concerns about equity, and just say that for this administrator, as Ladonna mentioned, data is critical to, you know, we need to know not only who's being served by this program, but also how, to what extent are vehicle emissions actually being cut. The whole point here is air quality and carbon emissions reduction. And so and those directly relate to who is the most needy here. Gasoline prices are rising, and so the people burning the most gasoline should be the focus for this. We want to make sure that we are both maximizing vehicle emissions cuts and addressing the people who are the most burdened by the extreme expense of having to spend a lot on gasoline. Those two goals partner perfectly together, but we just have to track the metrics and make sure that we are both maximizing vehicle emissions cuts and helping the most needy families, which are the low-income folks in these communities that are burdened by air pollution, who are also having to burn the most gasoline. I have not heard that mentioned in any of these conversations, and yet it is critical in this climate crisis and air pollution crisis. So I would be interested to know that the administrator will be tracking this data. It's not hard to track. And in fact, my nonprofit Cultura has developed a heat map at the zip code level showing where the biggest gasoline users are located, again, by zip code. And we can also track incomes of those zip codes. So it is actually very easy to put a targeted outreach out to the folks burning the most gasoline who are the lowest income. That is where we hit efficiency of this program and effectiveness of it. And then finally, I would just say that we really, actually, I think I've said it all, but I'm happy to answer any questions about any questions you might have about the ease of gathering this data, but data and metrics are critical if we want this program to grow. We can't have something that's just making some tiny drop in the bucket impact on emissions, where we can easily be doing much more and thereby gaining confidence in these programs and much better funding. All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Janelle. Yes, we do within several of our programs, we do have things like data dashboards and information that's available, but it isn't consistent. And again, our hope in bringing these two programs together in particular is to help make some of that consistent. And so yes, our administrator will be collecting data. We will be making all that data available to the public in as easy fashion as possible. That is absolutely something will be critical to the program going forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, we have Brian Dodds. Brian, I have unmuted your mic.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Certainly a lot of passion and thought into today's discussion, and I think it really speaks to the need to kind of make sure that this is done right and meets the needs of residents kind of throughout the state here. Also speaks to the complicated nature of trying to combine a clean vehicle assistance financing program with an incentive program to replace vehicles. And although they're probably very similar, I think they're designed originally to meet different needs. And so I think trying to combine those is certainly a complicated or a complicating factor in some of these discussions. Just a couple of points from our perspective, and I think other people have kind of made these, so I won't belabor the point. But I think in terms of trying to implement these programs in the solicitation, I do think there needs to be a strong focus on implementing these programs in disadvantaged communities. That's what the equity dollars were intended for. I think these programs need to maintain a focus on assisting residents in disadvantaged communities. Kind of beyond that, air districts are already implementing Clean Cars for All programs out there. I think it would create a lot of confusion by residents and issues moving forward. If there is a program that's operating in districts that is very similar but slightly different, I think if there are these differences between the programs of DAC and non-DAC, which again, I think we want the focus to be on DAC, but if that's not the case, then I think the districts need to be heavily involved and be the ones implementing, funding in their areas so that there isn't confusion at the consumer level, and those processes could still align with, statewide efforts. But those are my thoughts at the moment on this solicitation topic.
Great, thanks, Brian.
Next up, we have Tom Knox. Tom, I've unmuted your mic.
Hi, this is Tom Knox at Valley Clean Air Now. Just wanted to comment on, I may be incorrect here, but it seems like part of the reasoning behind lifting the DAC requirement is to allow a statewide Clean Cars for All program to spend more money, but wanted to share our experience in San Joaquin Valley, where we manage the Clean Cars for All program on behalf of the Valley Air District. We're seeing very, very strong organic demand in disadvantaged communities. Now that the program has been in the field for a while, there is such strong awareness within disadvantaged communities at the grassroots level that we currently have customers in queue that would net out to an annualized rate of probably $50 to $60 million. So when folks are looking at, how could it be possible to spend $250 or $300 million through Clean Cars for All, it is absolutely possible to do that within DACs only. That could be statewide. I think the available funding is sufficient to serve DACs only, and that opening this up beyond DACs would actually start to dilute the amount of funding and really impact the availability within disadvantaged communities. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Great, thanks, Tom. I appreciate that comment, and we'll definitely continue to think about how we would implement it and how and what we need to look at for how we kind of set some guardrails around it. So thank you.
Next up, we have Lonnie Mason. Lonnie, I've unmuted your mic.
Hello, good morning. Lonnie Mason, first generation and executive director for First Generation Environmental Health and Economic Development based out of the Bayview Hunters Point community. I'm listening and I'm hearing what some of the people are saying, especially from the agencies. Unfortunately, we met with the Air District. The Air District explained to us there was no funding for outreach. The Air District had claimed, that they had reached out to the community and dispersed 60-something thousand flyers. Well, we're saying that we're the only ones that can reach out to our community, because when we first saw what the program was doing, and they said that 5% of the African-American community took advantage of this, and we know that that's entirely inaccurate. That don't hold up. Talked to several members in the community. I have friends and family that's in the Bayview Hunters Point community, and none of them received the flyer talking about this particular program. We know where the majority of the money went, and we know who it went to. We know who took advantage of this program, but it was an African-American community. And so I had an issue with that. So what I did is I called their friends and family and asked them, did they receive that flyer in the mailbox? And none of them did. Now, just 2 weeks ago, after we talked to the Air District and we have a conversation with them, this is more than 2 weeks ago though, but I'm talking about 2 weeks ago, I checked my box, which I've had for 30 years. I get a flyer talking about the program. Interesting enough, we've sat down with the Air District more than once. And also we sat down with CAR. We're capable of running this and doing this. It's not gonna be any kind of confusion. If the Air District saying there's gonna be any confusion when it comes to seeking out and reaching people who qualify for this particular program, that's false. That's inaccurate. We can handle it. We can do the outreach in our community and educate our community to help them to be able to qualify for these vehicles. I do believe that the rebate should be raised higher, and it's too low. It's too low. I don't think that's enough. But we can't have individuals rushing to first generation and trying to work with them at the last moment when this program has been involved for many, many years, for the last 5, 6, 7 years. Now, all of a sudden, you have agencies that want to reach out to first generation. Now, I'm not calling their names out because I know they're on here right now, but they know who they are. I think it was wrong what they did and how they went about doing it and trying to engage and work with first generation. First generation can do this by themselves. We are capable, of doing this by ourselves. We know our community better than any other agency that is out there. So we can do this. I just don't like their actions. And the thing about it is to hear what that senator said, in regards to CARB and, to the Air District about being poverty pimps. Come on now. We're here. We're willing to work with you. We're here. I don't know who have friends in other organizations or agencies, but small grassroots organizations such as First Generation don't need their assistance to be able to communicate with the people in their own community. We can be funded directly by CARB or BACMID, their district, in order to reach out and help individuals receive the benefits in regards to receiving these electrical vehicles. They're there. They're ready to join, to find out about this program so they can take advantage of the program and get them electrical vehicle or a hybrid car. So we got to stop playing around. Let's be straight up. The funding is there. We're more than capable of handling and dealing with the people in our community and setting them up. Not only that, but dealing with the car industry as well. So let's stop, the game playing. We know what's going on. We've been asking for some time now. This is not the first. The Air District knows what time it is. CARB, what time it is. Small grassroots organizations are capable and knowledgeable and competent in handling this on their own. We just need the funding to be able to proceed with this process. Thank you.
Thanks, Lonnie. There are opportunities for funding, and we very much want to meet with you. I think some of our staff have been trying to get in contact with you to talk about that. We have Access Clean California, which is right now our primary kind of partnership hub, where we're trying to bring in and connect with as many local CBOs as possible to get solutions on the table for how to improve the outreach side of things. And to do exactly what you said, find those small groups that know their communities, that know how to speak to their communities and know how to work with their communities, and bring you in and make sure that you have the funding and the resources that you need to get that job done, and to feel like you have a seat at the table and are a partner in this. So, if you haven't already, I know Tabitha Willman and our team, I believe she's been trying to connect with you and Ali as well. We're more than happy to meet and see if we can find ways to make sure that you are built in kind of to our partnership network. We very much want to do that.
Can I say this? When you say reach out to me, I appreciate what you're saying. But when you say reach out to me, they reach out to us to let us know, because they want us to be engaged, and they want us to provide them solid information. And that we do. We come on here, we're engaged. But I have yet to sit down with anyone, because I know about Ali, and I know we met with him, and I forget the other young lady's name, but that was a while ago. That was last year. So nothing has moved.
Well, I believe, I'm happy to chat with you. I'm absolutely happy to meet with you, as well as I believe Tabitha Willman, who oversees the Access Clean California program. is very interested in meeting with you as well. So I will follow up with an email right after this meeting so that we can connect, because we would very much like to connect and talk with you more. And it isn't about engaging. We know that there's a lot on all of your calendars. There's a lot on your guys' plate too, and we don't expect you to come to all these meetings. We are happy to do the legwork in that respect. We do have enough staff, and we this year in particular have really tried to take a community engagement approach. And we want to come to the community meetings that either you or your other community members are having, and just listen to the issues that you guys are plagued with, and so that we can think about how we do define our programs. Even if you're not talking about our programs, if we know and understand the things that frustrate you when it comes to public servants, things that frustrate you with these types of programs, or things in general that your community needs, it'll help us to understand what kind of changes and tweaks we can think about, whether it's just in our simple administration, like the great idea of let the consumer choose if they want an email, a text message, or a phone call. If we hear these things from you directly, we do bring it back to the program. And we are this year in particular really trying to be even more transparent and more open about that, and participate in those types of conversations. We're happy to do the legwork. You don't have to come to everything. As long as we've got an open line of communication, we're happy to check in with you as often as it works for you, and make sure that you've got all the information that you need to be able to have those conversations. And again, through our partnerships, whether it's through Bay Area, whether it's through Access, whether it's through any of our grantees, our actual administrators, we very much want to support the grassroots, the smaller CBOs, and get you the funding and the tools that you need to feel like you are able to be effective with your community without it being hard, without it being messy. So we want to do that. I'll follow up with you in an email after this meeting.
Because I was going to say, because we don't need NGOs. I'm sorry to say that we don't need them. We can work directly with CARB, and getting this process done. We don't need other large NGOs coming into our community only to use us to take advantage of because the funding is there. I don't like that, and that's a problem.
Yeah, and I hear you, and I'll need to think through that a bit, because one of our challenges is capacity, and it's the same for you. We struggle with capacity, and while it would be great if we could individually have individual grants with all of the CBOs, that would be amazing, but I don't have the capacity to do that. And that's where our administrators are so important to us. They act as our arm. They're there to help do all those smaller agreements that we can't do. However, I do hear you. And so we'll go back and see what opportunities we do have to have, whether there are direct opportunities for funding, whether it's through this program or some of the other programs that we have. We'll go back and we'll take that look. So
okay, one more question. So why is it easy then to give money or funding to an NGO compared to a grassroots organization or CBO?
So this is a terrible answer, and I fully understand this is a terrible answer, but it is strictly it's the resources, and it's no different, right? If an NGO or if a grassroots CBO were to apply to one of our solicitations to run the whole thing, and you brought us an effective plan, there's no reason why you guys couldn't run the whole thing. But that's what we look for. I mean, these are multi-million, hundreds of millions of dollar grants that we put out for that administrator that works at our partnership, and we're open, works with us in partnership. And it can be any nonprofit that applies, and it can be or any public agency. It just cannot be a for-profit company. And that is because these funds are coming via a grant, and it cannot be a gift of funds of the state. We fund for-profit through a contract process that has a whole different set of terms associated with them. So for our grants, we run our solicitation, we look for our primary applicant. But what we're looking for, what we will be looking for in this future solicitation isn't just a primary applicant. We're looking for a primary applicant that can bring partnerships to the table. So let me be clear on what I mean by that. And maybe that's part of the confusion, is that we say this because it's the jargon that we're in every day, and maybe it isn't clear to other folks. So what we want is to see applications where we've got a primary lead, right? We've got a primary organization, and I don't care who it is. It can be a small CBO, it can be an NGO, it can be a public agency, as long as it falls within those parameters. And that particular applicant doesn't have to have all of the capacity. They can be partnered with somebody that can bring the capacity to do the outreach work. They can be partnered with somebody that can bring the capacity to do the processing work. They can be partnered with somebody who's going to provide the financial education. We want to see a team. We want to see, instead of just having a single person at the helm like we've traditionally done through these programs, we want to see a team that's going to bring diverse ideas, problem solving. How do we fix the things we haven't been able to fix in the past? And this is in no way to say that our current administrators haven't done a good job, because they have. They've done an amazing job with what we've given them. They've done an amazing job with the direction that our governor, our legislature, and us as state agency have given them over the years. And we're very, very thankful to all the work they put into the programs. But we recognize the areas that we need to do better. And we feel very strongly that having a team approach, effective collaborations, and effective communication across each of the components of the team, will help us have a more successful program, will help us better reach Black communities, better reach brown communities, better reach low-income communities. We're only going to do that if we've got all the right people at the table to do that. So this solicitation will be looking for, and I can't emphasize it enough, partnerships. We really want you guys to build strong teams. But the capacity is important, right? But that's where your partners should be.
Okay, we'll see. We're waiting. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Lonnie. Thank you. Up next, we have Jonathan Changus. Jonathan, I've unmuted your mic.
Yeah, and I hate to double dip, but I really appreciate the conversation so far, and just went into a couple of questions and maybe comments, and maybe just throwing support for things that have been shared previously. But again, Jonathan Changus from the Center for Sustainable Energy, and thinking about kind of the transition, as Ramon meant, about really programs centering on equity through all facets, as well as kind of the comments I believe Ladonna made about evaluating what's worked and what hasn't to kind of inform. And there's another comment too about the importance of data to see how things are going. And so I want to support all of that in the form of also making sure that if we want to have that partnership model, Lisa, you know, the admin is an important piece. We need to be able to fund all facets, including the CBO partnerships. And so I would encourage CARB, as they're looking to get out of the first come, first serve and into a more case management needs-based approach that is more resource intensive from a program administration space and from a partner space. If we're really sincere about doing it right and doing it well, we need to be able to equip the grassroots CBO partners need to be reimbursed and compensating accordingly to help make that happen. I do think that there are some good models currently that CARB has that can obviously continue to be iterative and improved upon. I did want to clarify some comments that were made previously about, I think Chris from Coalition for Clean Air, about not being like CVRP and needing to rely more on CBOs. And just so that we're all clear, there's a robust network of CBO partners currently in place for CVRP and have been for over 4 years that are on the boots in the ground, local community-based grassroots organizations, not CSE, not NGOs, that we partner with to help not only get the word out about the program, but to help inform us where there's problems, where is it not hitting, what are potential design changes, and that feedback's been critical. And it's, you know, CBOs aren't just there to share about the program to their communities. They're also a critical resource in coming back like we're here today and saying, like, you know, this isn't working well, or that, or something that did work well, and informing kind of all facets of program implementation. Is CBO partners have a role and can and should be at the table for all facets of the program implementation space. And I think that's true for CVRP as it continues to transition to a more equity-centric program. but definitely for the exclusively equity programs that CARB runs as well. I also wanted to note that, I don't know, Ladonna, maybe we can connect. There is a wealth of data about who has been reached and who hasn't for CVRP that I would love to share with you. And it corroborates some of the concerns, is that we do know that for CVRP, there's both survey data and program data that supports concerns about underrepresentation, underserving Black community, and something that we're actively working and looking to expand our partner network to make sure that we not only look at that and say, that's a problem, but work on fixing it. And that's a model, I think, hopefully, of what we'd like to see more across the board. It's not enough to say, that's an issue. We have to take tangible investments and put them in play to correct that. And so we'd love to talk to you more about that. That's not really specific to this, but it is something that future solicitations, all solicitations should be thinking about, is we got to collect the data first. We have to then utilize the data and see if where the deficiencies are. So I don't know how to structure that explicitly in the solicitation design, other than to make sure that, as you've already noted, Lisa, that a partnership model with local groups representing their diverse communities. It was mentioned that it's not a homogenous disadvantaged community. The needs, the languages, the cultural sensitivity, relevant materials, all those need to be tailored and not just written well, but it's going to be an engagement effort, like what Lonnie's been talking about. And I think what we heard from Ladonna is, like, you need folks who are in the community to be the voice, and the face, and to make sure that everyone is having an opportunity to participate in programs that they're eligible for. So I don't think there's a question there as much as strong encouragement to really make clear, if it needs to be made clear, the importance, the centrality of local community-based organizations in the successful implementation of the program, for sure in the outreach space, but I think in other facets as well.
Thanks, Jonathan. Super helpful. And I think, one of the things you said that I think is really, really important, and this comes right back to the balance that we're constantly dealing with. We know it's going to cost. We know that we have been very lucky to run some of the first come, first serve components of these programs in a very lean way in the past. And we're very thankful for that. And I recognize that what we are going to be asking for in this solicitation can't be ran in the same lean way. What we will be up against, and where we can use our stakeholders' help, is educating others, educating the legislature in particular about that, because we get a lot of criticism for what the admin costs look like for these programs. And what folks don't understand is how much it does take to make sure that the message is tailored, to make sure that even something as simple as choosing between email, text, and a phone call, there are costs associated with every single one of those things. And whether I'm implementing the program or whether you guys are implementing the program, it's, we've got to find the right way to do it. We need things to be lean, because we will always get pushed to make sure that we are effective and efficient in how we are spending our dollars. These are public dollars, and these grant solicitations have to be competitive. They have to be thoughtful. The budgets are going to need to be very clear and well thought out. But we do recognize that when we're working with CBOs in particular that don't bring the same level of capital that others can, that there are costs associated with that. So we know that we will be thinking about how that's structured. Competitive budgets will be very important, though. And I do want to underscore that. We know it's not going to be as lean as we've seen in the past. Also want to be mindful of the fact that we will, if we want to continue to fund these programs, we have to show that it can't be at a giant price tag either. And that's probably not the right way to say it. I apologize, but there's a balance. Again, there's a balance that we have to do. So appreciate the thought. And again, all I can say is please educate. For those of you that can and have that capability, You know, we need to make sure that folks understand what it does take to implement these programs, knowing full well that our goal is to get as much money as possible out to the consumers. With that, I know I think we've got another hand that just came in, but really quick before Ari, I have you open up the next line. I've been trying to go through as many of the Q&A as possible for comments that I'm receiving. So for purposes of the recording, I am trying to address as many of these kind of verbally so that we've got them on the recording for folks that read them in the future or may watch this in the future. One of the challenges is where I'm getting really long comments. I'm not going to go through and kind of read those. Some of the comments I am trying to paraphrase for you, so you've got the gist of what we've received. And I did receive one more comment from somebody earlier, just talking about their process and again, wanting to make sure that we recognize getting these programs open soon is very important, and absolutely hear you loud and clear there. But some questions that we did get: interested in timeline from Lawrence. Let's see, interested in timeline, hope to hear the expected start date for these programs. Again, we don't have a start date for these programs just yet. I hope you've heard throughout this how complicated things are, but we are working our best. We do want to get the solicitation out June, July timeframe if we can, recognizing we need to slow down a bit, try to have some more public conversation on the policy. We will do that. We've heard you loud and clear. And we will continue those conversations after as well, because it's an ongoing process. There's a lot for us to accomplish over the next several months. When we will open the programs, I don't have a good sense for you yet. We will do our best to do that as expeditiously as possible, without overrunning the process that we know needs to happen, especially working through the policy issues that were raised today. A great comment that was made by Vivian at CHTC about ongoing trust within disadvantaged communities. Building these programs and building the trust with disadvantaged communities does take time, absolutely. So thank you very much for that comment. A comment from Janelle London, for the largest gasoline users, gasoline savings of switching to an EV can be sufficient for covering monthly payments. And how can we be ensured that the administrator communicates this important economic benefit to the most gasoline burdened families? That's a great question. And I think educating on the life cycle cost of ownership for these vehicles is really important, and something we've done kind of in partnership with some of our other state agencies. And we have various tools available, Drive Clean website, driveclean.org. And I know CEC's got some great information as well. But figuring out how to kind of tailor that back into our programs is a great suggestion. So we'll continue to think about ways that we can address that. Then last, which is actually, and I think I must have cleared another one. I did have another question in here from Roman. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to clear the question, but I seem to have, and it had to do with again, kind of getting clarification on the overlap within the statewide program and the existing district programs. So somebody who's in LA, for example, who doesn't qualify for Replace Your Ride, will they be eligible for statewide program? And I think and then again, a very similar question kind of building off of that from Alejandra is, if someone is in Bay Area and a DAC and does qualify for the Bachman program, would they have the option to go through one or the other? Those are great questions. And today, I'm not sure, Anthony or Aaron, if you want to address those today. And if not, then I suggest we will try to get a calendar date set up as soon as possible to have a more in-depth conversation about, what we really think the right pathway should be for how we structure the statewide in partnership with the district programs. So Aaron or Anthony, would either of you like to kind of address that comment?
Yeah, I can address it quickly, Lisa.
Thanks, Anthony.
And so the question is, if someone is in a Bay Area DAC and they qualify for Bay Area's program, and the current statewide proposal would mean that that person would still go through Bay Area. The statewide proposal is for essentially every zip code, because the districts do the eligibilities by zip code. Every zip code, whether they're in those districts or not, anywhere in the state, it would be excuse me, any district that's not currently, any zip code that's not currently eligible would be eligible for the statewide program, regardless of their location. I don't know about this Drive Clean Assistance Program, if it will be phased out or not. That's not something we've discussed. But yes, it is for everyone in California who, the statewide program is for everyone who is not currently eligible for those district programs.
Thanks, Anthony. And again, we will follow up. We will have another work group and have more conversations around this. We hear you. The DAC issue is one that we need to talk about more. So we'll get something put together on that. There is one additional question that came in. Is there potential to expand EFMP statewide to serve LMI or low and moderate income consumers, and Clean Cars for All to serve low and moderate income consumers in, hold on, I'm sorry. This came in from Jonathan, and I think I just read it wrong. Is there a potential to expand EFMP statewide to serve LMI and CC4A in LMI and DACs? Sorry, Jonathan, I'm butchering your question here. And so you got your hand raised, which is great. Aria, can you unmute Jonathan's line really quick to clarify his question, since I'm butchering it?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Sorry, Ladonna, hang on one moment.
Yeah, sorry about that. It wasn't well written. The question was, enhanced fleet modernization program is a lower incentive, and it's only for low and moderate income consumers in 2 air districts. And so I was curious if there was an interest in serving all low and moderate income consumers through the statewide program for CC4A. Is it something where you could maintain that structure that currently exists, where there's a much larger rebate for folks that are low income in DACs, and then have a base program, the EFMP, more broadly? Was that discussed or considered to try and figure out how that all low income consumers who need assistance have access? Or is it something with scarce resources availability? I think it was Tom talked about how the organic growth in DACs alone is already sufficient. So I guess I was just asking if a base product for low income and a higher incentive for low income in DACs was something that had been discussed and considered for statewide CC4A.
Thank you for the question, Jonathan. This is Aaron Hilliard. I'll go ahead and address that one. In terms of speaking about EFMP, I think you mentioned it in your question, the resources are scarce. With that base EFMP program, we're talking about $2.8 million annually per year. In terms of expanding it, we have made the technical changes to expand it, but that budget has not expanded beyond the $2.8 million per year. So when we're talking about EFMP versus Clean Cars for All, the budget is really, really small relative. So that $2.8 million a year isn't going to change. There is potential to expand it statewide, but scarce resources. So in terms of that base program, it isn't going to expand beyond its current funding amount. We do have an opportunity to expand it geographically, but it's still going to be that $2.8 million. And I think just relative to what we're talking about with Clean Cars for All budget, it's just kind of a drop in the bucket. And so I kind of hope that answers your question, but I, kind of want to reiterate with just some things just in looking in the conversation that we've had in this work group with Clean Cars for All or EFMP, we're not abandoning equity. We are still focusing on equity. And even with geographical expansions to eligibility, we still want to maintain that focus on equity and those that need it the most. And that's just something that I really wanted to reiterate. And this question kind of gave the opportunity to do that. But yeah, so the EFMP, it's still going to be that real small drop in the bucket. It's not going to, we can expand it geographically, but it's still the $2.8 million annually. And so really it doesn't kind of change. I don't really feel that it changes the discussion when it comes to expansion statewide with Clean Cars for All or EF&P, it's still that, you know, we want to look at these things. We're still looking at it as an equity focus, regardless of the geographic expansion. So I hope that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I think what was a little confusing in understanding is that, you know, the DAC component, as we heard earlier, is such a central feature of Clean Cars for All, and to expand that program, but to include the zip codes that otherwise feel like EF&P. I think I understand the mechanics about there being a really small budget for just the EF&P, but if you remove the DAC filter statewide, it just seems like you're functionally expanding EF&P, but maybe I'm missing something. So I appreciate the explanation. I think I understand, and I suspect there'll just be more discussion on that component going
so
forward.
I think I guess, and that's a good follow-up question. I think what I can say about that is that the distinction between Clean Cars for All and EF&P is simply one, at this point, is simply one of funding source. They have functionally been implemented together historically, and it is simply one of funding source. And so I think your comment about removing the DSC requirement and this, that, and the other, I think the only other distinction that I would make is that Clean Cars for All is focused on cleaner technologies and has always had that focus on disadvantaged communities. But functionally, they have been implemented together. And so I think the distinction I'm making is simply a matter of where the funding is coming from. And so I think hopefully that kind of further clarifies the point that I'm trying to make, and that distinction.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I'm admittedly not as familiar with EF&P, so that's super helpful, great context. Thank you for that.
Sure.
All right, and we are going to wind down. We've got one more hand raised. So Aria, I will kick to you, and then we'll do some next steps.
Thanks, Lisa. Ladonna Williams, I've unmuted your mic.
Yes, hello again. I just wanted to add a little extra, and I do appreciate, Lisa, that you know, giving out compliments where they're due. I don't dispute that at all, and you want to support your team of folks. Lonnie somewhat touched on it, but I think it needs to be noted, and especially as you replay these tapes back, so that these are lessons learned. When we engaged with our local air district, and we work with them on a regular basis on many things, and no doubt there is some committed folks there. However, you guys need to understand what happened. Lonnie briefly touched on it, but he needed to give a little more detail. And that is, we didn't just meet with the air district one time on the issue of clean cars. We met with them several times on the issues of clean cars. And I know because All Positives is who helped bring First Generations and others into this process. Yet, when it got executed, they told us they didn't really have the money for outreach for us engaging with them at that level. They then told us they were reaching out to others who were not at the table. So basically what they did is they took our input, our suggestions, our recommendations. No doubt they used them, but they used them to their benefit and then told us they were reaching out to other folks. That is not engagement. That goes against every principle of environmental justice and any equities, processes, or lenses that you guys think are proper protocols for that. That goes against everything that is any sense of fairness or justice, especially in dealing with our communities. That created, and I don't know who it was, but I appreciate the comment of trust, that trust factor. That is why it has taken us this long to get to this point, to really figure out who's reaching out. When you mentioned Tabitha and others, we have been engaging in these different areas because our communities have been left out of these different venues. And when they got broken up like that, it was difficult for us to know who we were dealing with. And so some of your administrators who then began to reach out, after ignoring us. This wasn't just this year's process. We started this clean cars process back in 2017. And we were ignored by the local folks. We won't just totally throw them out there under the bus, but we were ignored by them. We did not start to hear from them until just recently. And even then, they didn't reach out to me. They reached out to one of the groups that I brought in. And so when I say me, I'm talking about all positives. There are others that have not been included in this process. They don't really yet have the confidence to engage yet with agencies, but you will meet them soon. But there are a number of folks, you're only hearing me and Lonnie right now, but there are others that have not been part of this and their communities desperately need this. So I think it's important for us to be transparent, for you to know what our plight has been like to get us to this point. And so I wanted to share that. So as we do move forward and you do see the reluctance or can't understand, well, if you sent people to reach out to us, why we've been hesitant is because there's been a lack, or I should say there's been no trust because of how they have dealt with us. So thank you again for allowing me to, or for listening to my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Ladonna. I do appreciate the background there. And I know you've heard this from me before. When it comes to the things that my team and we are working on, we do want to do better. We want to make sure that the first time somebody comes in the door, you know that you've not only been heard, but that we are taking what you've said and thinking about how to address the programs and working with you to find solutions and making sure that you do have a seat at the table. So a legitimate seat at the table. So we will continue to huddle internally and find ways to improve upon that.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take next steps. For our master of ceremonies, unfortunately, has ran into some technical issues today, and we've lost him from the feed. And I don't have his final next steps, so you're going to get my off the cuff. Off the cuff next steps are, as we've commended to today, to have some additional work groups on the policy. Oh, yay, Ali. We're going to do our best to go back, take a look at our calendar. We do have a tight timeline for funding plan development, which is a little bit separate from this process. Oh, and there was a question that I think also accidentally got cleared about whether or not we have to go back to the board in order to launch, finalize our solicitation and so forth. No, we do not. The board in our last year's funding plan did approve us kind of moving forward with the statewide concept. And we've got within our funding plan running solicitations for these. So we have the authority from the board to continue to move forward in these conversations and get our solicitation out there. We also do not bring the board who our selected administrators are. That is delegated down to us, but there is a competitive process that we go through for finalizing all of that. All of that said, though, next steps will be some additional work groups on policy. We will spend some time working through the issues of territory, disadvantaged communities, needs-based methods and things like that in the coming weeks and months. We will also be working at the staff level to continue to write the solicitation and get those components done. Again, from a solicitation standpoint, it is a mechanical thing. It's the best way that I can describe it. Is it is a document that lays out what we look for in our partners and how we would score an application and what you bring us as a proposal for what the program will look like from an implementation standpoint, from an administrator standpoint. And so we're going to continue to work on the mechanics of that. Again, that document will not be public until we actually put out the solicitation. Once that solicitation is on the street, it will have a period of time by which we will take questions. Questions will have a deadline by which they need to get to us so that we can provide, we will have a work group meeting that is a teleconference where we accept additional questions, provide responses to those, and then final responses come out in writing after the fact. Those serve as a guide to potential applicants to use as they're preparing their application package for the solicitation. And then the solicitation will close. Staff then goes back and does all the scoring. We look at all of the applications that we've received. We score them against the criteria that we've put out in that solicitation, and then we'll make our selections. So there's a lot of work there to come. And I think that while our hope is to get a solicitation available sometime in the June, July timeframe, waiting for the next budget to kind of frame up, it will be sometime thereafter before an administrator is selected. One thing that I don't think got a chance to get to today, and so we will even think about potentially having another mechanics type work group focused on solicitation, is this what we are generally looking for. And I know Ali did touch on this at the very beginning, is real strong backgrounds, people that can kind of bring kind of proven ability to run these types of programs. And the reason why that is an important criteria for solicitations in general is that we do want to be able to hit the ground running as quickly as we can once we have gotten a grantee under a grant. We don't want to have to build the program from the ground up. That will just take another year in our experience in getting a program out there. So we will be looking for key things like experience and partnerships, strong budgets, and so forth. So again, we welcome you to come talk with us at any point in time. We're happy to meet with folks one-on-one. We're happy to meet with folks in coalition groups and teams. If you've got a team you want us to talk with, if you have community meetings or you know of other groups that do community meetings that'd be good for us to come listen to, please let us know. We really do want to do that. We really want to be in your space as much as possible, so you don't always have to come to us. So please let us know, reach out, and if you haven't already, make sure you're on our listserv for these programs, for both the CC4A and for financing assistance, so that you can hear when our next meetings are up and coming, so that you've got them on your calendar and you're able to participate if you so wish. And if you don't make a meeting, we will have these recordings that we post within 2 weeks after, and you can watch those from there and follow up with any questions that you have after that. Ali, any final parting remarks from you?
No, I just wanted to apologize for the disconnection. I don't know what happened. We went dark on my phone carrier as well as home internet connection, so I was totally disconnected from the internet world. I'm so sorry, but I know that Lisa, you were in good hands. Lisa was taking care of all of those great questions that you might have. I'll definitely go back and watch the recordings, and I would be more than happy to get connected with any of you. You can find my email address and the Gov delivery notice. Shoot me an email. I would be more than happy to talk to you. And thank you all for your participation and your time today.
Yep. Thank you all so much. We'll talk to you again soon.